Can Harvard foster happiness? Well, maybe. I'm Kim Tisor, your host of The Good Place. Thank you so much for watching. Also, thank you in advance for liking the video and subscribing to this channel so you are notified when there are new episodes. Did you know Harvard could lead you to a state of happiness? Or at least to a better understanding of it, should you take its 6-week course called Managing Happiness. It explores such questions as, how often should I expect to be happy? How can we safeguard our happiness when dealing with difficult people? And how can we cultivate happiness during tough times? All great questions, and you can discover the answers to them if you take this free course. Could be fun if you have some extra time on your hands, not to mention then you can tell all your friends that I took a class from Harvard. How delightful. I will put a link to the course in the description below, should you be the slightest bit interested. Well, the last time you and I met, I told you that I would be discussing a homily, or a sermon, if you will, from Father Mike Schmitz, because I was assigned to discuss this week at our women's group at church, and I figured why not kill two birds with one stone, and cultivate a message, devise a message from his homily for you. And this really ties in nicely to one of the questions that the Harvard course that I just mentioned tries to tackle, and that is, how do we cultivate happiness during difficult times? But actually, Father Schmitz goes a lot deeper. This message offers some solid advice when you find yourself asking, what do I do when my life is not what I imagined it would be? Or another way of putting it, what do you do when you find yourself saying, I hate my life? Now, this homily is actually the third in a series that Father Schmitz gave, titled Si vis pacem parabellum. Si vis pacem meaning, if you want peace, parabellum, prepare for war. What a dichotomy. So the entire focus of this 3-part series is about, if you have your heart set on entering heaven at the end of your earthly life, then now you must prepare for the obstacles, for the opposition that will come your way. And it will, because there is an enemy. Furthermore, the environment that we're in, the board game, if you will, is constantly changing, and we have to be cognizant of that. And sometimes it appears as if it is out to steal our hope and our joy. For instance, maybe you meant every word you said when you said, until death do us part, when you stood at that altar, but your spouse walked out on you. Other things outside of our control, maybe a devastating diagnosis that upended your life, to include your finances. What about, I don't know, maybe a family member, a close loved one that did something so heinous, so horrendous, that it brought shame and embarrassment on your family name? When any of the things that I just mentioned happen to us, or just pick a scenario, there are a plethora of bad ones, when they happen to us and they strip us of our joy, there is a real temptation to develop a futile mindset where we just dwell on how bad life is, how much we hate our life, and how, quite frankly, it's probably not going to change. Now, Father Schmitz gives a great example of what would probably cause most people to despair when he talks about a movie that I have to be honest, I've never seen it, starring Matt Damon, called The Martian, but hearing him talk about it, I want to see it. So in this movie, Matt Damon's character goes to Mars with some other astronauts, and while they're there, this massive storm brews, it stirs up, and something happens, and the other astronauts think that Matt Damon's character has been killed, that he has died, and they decide not to retrieve his body. They don't want to risk losing their own lives, so they leave Mars, go back to Earth without him. Now, as the movie goes on, we discover that Matt Damon's character was actually knocked unconscious. He comes to, he's alive, and then realizes that he has been left there to die. You can just imagine how crushed he would feel being left on this planet all alone. He could easily waste time wondering, oh, woe is me. What am I going to do? But no, he comes to terms with what has happened to him, and he sets out to tackle each obstacle one at a time. He realizes, okay, I need to bandage up myself. Apparently, he'd been injured by something from the storm. I guess a piece of metal flew into him or something. So he takes that out and he takes care of himself. So, mission accomplished there. Then he realizes, I need to find food. He figures out a way to get food, and then water, one thing after another. So he tackles one problem at a time. And that's really a lot of what faith is not having all the answers, but when there's struggle, when there's difficulty in life, we tackle it head on, one step at a time. And I love the example that Father Schmitz gives us from the Bible in this homily, and that is the Blessed Virgin Mary, who models this kind of faith for us. And many of us know this story of when the archangel comes to her to let her know that she was to bear the Son of God. She would give birth to Jesus. And she asked this, as Father Schmitz put it, this clarifying question, well, how can this be since I've had no relations with a man? And then, of course, Gabriel gives her the answer that the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore, the child to be born will be called Holy, the Son of God. And of course, Mary gives her yes. And this is what Father Schmitz points out that I think is so good, is that immediately after that, what does Scripture tell us? That the angel left, the angel departed. And I've never really thought about that, but think of all the questions she would have had. Like, well, how am I going to be equipped to raise the Son of God? Are you sure I'm the right person for this task? Is this going to require any kind of special training that I need to be focused on over the next 9 months? I don't know. There would have been so many questions, but she wasn't given any other instructions, right? She was given one piece of knowledge, and she had to step forward in what little she had, what little she knew. And that is often our faith. That is the faith life, is taking it one step at a time. And really, isn't that the way God works in our life? If we're even given the grace to know answers to some of those big questions we have in life, like should we marry or should we not? Should we marry this person or not? Should I take this job, move across the country? If we're given instructions, direction to those types of questions, often that's about it. I don't know of anyone that I've ever come across who has said that God just laid out their life plan before them when they were praying. If we're not doing this, I feel like what we should be praying is, Lord, show me what to do today. Lord God, guide my steps right now. I love Proverbs 16:9, which says, a man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. One step at a time. Father Schmitz points out it would be impossible to plan your life because, as we mentioned before, the playing field, the environment is constantly changing. But the beautiful thing is God never does. And we know we can trust him even when stepping around the proverbial landmines, if you will. Speaking of landmines, there was once a fighter pilot named Colonel John Boyd. He became an instructor pilot who earned the nickname 42nd Boyd for his standing bet as an instructor that, beginning from a position of disadvantage, he could defeat any opposing pilot in air combat maneuvering in less than 40 seconds. Now, he didn't just wake up one day as this knowledgeable, skilled pilot. He actually studied dogfights from World War I, World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam War. And in the course of his studies, he came up with a decision-making plan, if you will, called the OODA loop, which stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, Act, Loop, or Repeat. And this applies to you no matter who you are and no matter the situation that you're up against. So what OODA means is, okay, I first have to observe my situation. I have to observe the data. Okay, I also have to make a decision about it, and then I have to act on the decision. So The O and the D and the A are pretty intuitive. It's kind of common knowledge, I guess. But the secret to this, the key part of this planning process is the second O, which again stands for orient. So orient has to do with coming to terms with the reality of what is, recognizing that your situation may not be what you had hoped for, what you had longed for. You have to reorient yourself to the reality that is, not wishing that it were some other way, like maybe you had envisioned all your life. You really have to accept and understand what is going on. This is not the time to bury yourself in the sand or go la 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 la. Now, many of you know that I have talked about receiving a second breast cancer diagnosis. That was back in February, and then 6 weeks later, I lost my job. Needless to say, my reality was changing. Now, one thing I will say I had going for me is that in the back of my mind, from the time of my first diagnosis, I always knew that cancer could recur, and somehow I think I just kind of planned on it. And I know for some women, receiving a second diagnosis can be worse than the first. And I think maybe partly because they feel like the first time they did everything they could within their power, so they thought, to prevent cancer from coming back. And so they moved on with life full speed ahead, thinking it wouldn't come back. So it can be really devastating for some when it happens again. But we know cancer is an enemy and it does not give up easily. And quite frankly, nor do I. But again, my reality changed, especially when I lost my job. And here I was going to all of these appointments and starting treatment. Things had changed, but it also gave me the time to reflect on where I want to go with life. How am I going to move forward? And I decided that even though I had spent a number of years in media and loved every minute of it, I also came to realize there is such a thing as age discrimination, especially for women in media, even in Christian media. And I decided I did not want to continue along that career route and decided to do something totally different. And I've decided to go into the funeral industry. And I hope to share more about that in the coming weeks and months. So as you orient yourself perhaps to an unexpected, undesirable situation, as mentioned before, you have to have an understanding of reality, of what it is. And I like Father Schmitz's definition of understanding, and that is knowing the value of revealed truth. Isn't that good? Knowing the value of revealed truth. Of course, his message begs the question, do we understand the value of Christ, of his death on the cross, of our relationship with him? If we truly understand that, we will give our life to him. And he gives this great analogy of a couple at the altar. They're about to get married. And the bride-to-be says, oh, honey, I love you so much. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I give myself all to you, except, remember my boyfriend, such and such, I'd still like to give him maybe 1 week every year. And there was this other guy too, but okay, just the two of them, but otherwise I give my all to you. That's not really giving your all to your spouse. And in essence, we do that to God when we say we give our all to him, and yet we live our life as we see fit, as we choose. It's kind of like playing with the nails, asking, can we just play with the nails that hung you on the cross for a little bit? So if we set out to follow Christ, we must stay the course, recognizing that the board, the environment keeps changing. We can resent our life, how it has unfolded, or we can prepare. We can see life as a burden, or we can see opportunities to make decisions for Christ every day. If you want hope, if you want peace, if you want joy, parabellum, prepare for war. If you would like to hear Father Mike's complete message, then please check out the link that I've included below. I promise you will be inspired. And next week, I plan on talking about the significance of first. And I will reveal to you something that I lost a handful of months ago that has caused me to kind of reorient and reprioritize something that I once held very, very valuable and high esteem. So hopefully you will tune in for that. Until then, God bless you and have a wonderful week.